Before we begin, please consider to like and subscribe. Love you guys.
The war ended the moment Captain Marcus Jones bit into the writhing acid-green mass that had been dissolving his soldiers from the inside out for 3 months. The Hegemony's Supreme War Council had gathered to witness what they assumed would be humanity's final surrender. Instead, they watched in paralyzed horror as the human commander chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and asked for seconds. It is important to understand that the Hegemony is not a cruel organization by nature. Neither is it particularly merciful. For 18,000 cycles, it has expanded across the galaxy not through malice, but through a simple principle. Superior beings deserve superior worlds. The strong consume the weak. It is the way of things. Their conquests follow a pattern refined over millennia. First comes the assessment. Orbital surveys determine resource value, population centers, defensive capabilities. Then the classification. Species are ranked by threat level, cultural complexity, biological resilience. Finally, the application. The most efficient method of subjugation or elimination is selected from their vast arsenal of weapons, both conventional and exotic. Humanity had rated as a Class C threat, technologically adequate but unexceptional, physically robust but within normal parameters, culturally fragmented and politically naive. The perfect combination for rapid conquest with minimal resource expenditure. The biological weapon they deployed against humanity was elegant in its efficiency. The Kralix symbiont was a marvel of organic engineering, a microscopic predator that could infiltrate any carbon-based life form, multiply exponentially within hours, and dissolve its host from within while keeping them conscious until the very end. It had proven devastatingly effective against 47 previous species, from the silicon-based crystalline collective to the energy beings of the Nexus worlds. The symbiont worked by infiltrating the nervous system through respiratory exposure, then establishing colonies throughout the host's cellular structure. Once established, it began breaking down cellular walls from within, converting biological matter into nutrients for its own reproduction. The process was designed to be slow enough that the host remained conscious and aware throughout their dissolution, serving as both a weapon of terror and a demonstration of hegemony superiority. Previous species had tried everything: environmental suits, atmospheric scrubbers, genetic modification, cybernetic implants. Nothing worked. The Kralix adapted to every countermeasure, evolved past every defense. In the end, every species faced the same choice: submit to hegemony rule or watch their people melt from the inside out. Humanity had been chosen for termination not because they were particularly threatening, but because they possessed something the hegemony desired: a cluster of worlds rich in trilithium deposits, perfectly positioned along critical hyperspace routes. The humans had named their largest colony New Eden. The irony was not lost on the hegemony's strategists. New Eden was everything humanity aspired to become. Where Earth bore the scars of industrial excess and environmental collapse, New Eden had been carefully terraformed to preserve its natural beauty while supporting advanced civilization. Crystal cities rose from pristine forests. Agricultural zones produced abundance without destroying ecosystems. The colonists spoke of it as their chance to be better than their ancestors, to prove that humans could live in harmony with their environment. It was this very idealism that made New Eden the perfect target. Destroying humanity's greatest achievement would break their spirit more thoroughly than any military defeat. The initial deployment was textbook. Kralix spores were seeded into the atmospheric processes of 12 human colonies simultaneously. The Hegemony's biological warfare specialists had calculated precise deployment patterns to ensure maximum coverage with minimal detection. By the time the first symptoms appeared, every major population center had been exposed. Within days, entire cities began to scream. The humans fought back, of course. They always do. Emergency quarantine protocols were implemented. Atmospheric scrubbers worked around the clock. Medical teams raced to develop treatments, vaccines, countermeasures. Colonial governments coordinated evacuation efforts, moving populations to sealed habitats and underground bunkers. But what weapons can you deploy against an enemy that lives in your very breath? The Hegemony had faced desperate species before, those who scorched their own worlds rather than submit, who sacrificed millions in futile last stands. They expected something similar from humanity. They did not expect Dr. James Harrison.
Dr. Harrison was a xenobiologist attached to the human military's rapid response team on New Eden. 46 years old, thin and unassuming, with graying hair and calloused hands from decades of fieldwork. He had spent his career studying alien ecosystems on the frontier worlds, cataloguing life forms that defied terrestrial understanding, searching for patterns that might explain how life emerged and evolved across the galaxy. He had 3 children back on Earth. Sarah, 8 years old, who collected specimens from the garden and asked endless questions about why flowers had different colors. Thomas, 22, fresh out of military academy with his father's curiosity and his mother's stubbornness. And David, 6, who still believed monsters weren't real and who drew pictures of his daddy fighting space dragons. His wife Margaret thought he worked too much, worried too much, took too many risks. She was right. Harrison had a peculiar habit that made his colleagues nervous. When studying potentially dangerous alien organisms, he preferred to test them on himself rather than laboratory subjects. It was unscientific, reckless, and against every safety protocol. But Harrison believed you couldn't truly understand a life form until you experienced it firsthand. This philosophy had nearly killed him 7 times across his career. It had also led to breakthroughs that saved thousands of lives and revolutionized xenobiology. His colleagues called him brilliant. His supervisors called him insane. His family called him daddy and waited for him to come home. It was this habit that led him to his study on the 3rd day of the outbreak. The colony's medical center had become a charnel house. Thousands of infected colonists filled every available space, their bodies slowly dissolving while their minds remained trapped in deteriorating flesh. The screaming had stopped, not because the pain had lessened, but because vocal cords could no longer function. Dr. Michael Reeves, Harrison's assistant and closest friend, worked tirelessly among the infected. 34 years old, earnest and compassionate, Reeves had volunteered for frontier service because he believed medicine should serve those who needed it most. He moved through the makeshift wards with quiet determination, administering pain medication that did little good, offering comfort to those who had no hope, documenting symptoms with the methodical precision of a researcher who knew his data might help future victims. Harrison found Reeves in Ward 7, kneeling beside a colonist named David Kim. Kim had been a hydraulic engineer responsible for maintaining the water systems that kept New Eden's cities functioning. Now he was barely recognizable as human, his body partially liquefied, but his eyes still alert, still aware. "How long?" Harrison asked quietly. 6 hours, Reeves replied without looking up. "Maybe 8. His nervous system is remarkably resilient." Kim's eyes tracked to Harrison's face. The man tried to speak, but his throat had dissolved 3 hours earlier. Instead, he mouthed a single word: "Please." Harrison nodded. He administered the mercy injection himself, watching as Kim's eyes finally closed in peace. It was the 47th time Harrison had performed this act of compassion. Each one carved another line in his face, another weight on his shoulders. "We're not going to find a cure in time," Reeves said as they left the ward. "Are we?" Harrison looked out through the medical center's reinforced windows. Smoke rose from the city's industrial sector, where emergency crews were burning infected areas to prevent further spread. In the distance, he could see the lights of evacuation transports lifting off, carrying the uninfected to orbital stations that might not be safe much longer. "No," Harrison said, "we're not." But Harrison was not a man who accepted defeat easily. In his laboratory on the medical center's research level, he had assembled the most comprehensive collection of Kralix specimens in human space. Live samples, dead samples, tissue cultures, genetic sequences. He had studied them under every wavelength of light, subjected them to every form of analysis human science could provide. The creatures were unlike anything in the galactic biological database. Under magnification, they moved with an almost intelligent purpose, organizing themselves into complex patterns, communicating through bioelectrical pulses that resembled neural activity. They were beautiful in their way, elegant, perfect killing machines shaped by evolution or design into the ultimate biological weapon.
Beautiful and undeniably deadly. Harrison sat alone in his laboratory as screams echoed through the medical center below. The colony's military had implemented scorched earth protocols. Better to burn what they could control than let the hegemony claim it intact. Outside his window, entire city blocks were being systematically destroyed by their own defenders. He thought of Margaret, safe on Earth for now, probably watching the news feeds and knowing exactly what was happening here. He thought of Sarah, who would grow up without her father if he didn't find an answer. He thought of Thomas, who had requested transfer to the new Eden Relief Force and would arrive in 2 days if the orbital blockade could be broken. He thought of David, who still drew pictures of his daddy being brave. Harrison picked up the container holding live Kralix specimens. The creatures pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, almost hypnotic in their complexity. According to every analysis, they were perfectly adapted killing machines. Their cellular structure was harder than most metals. Their reproductive rate was exponential. Their digestive acids could break down any known biological compound. They were also the only alien organism Harrison had encountered that showed signs of true intelligence. Not just instinct, not just programmed behavior, but actual cognitive activity, problem-solving, adaptation, learning. Harrison had spent his career studying alien life forms. He understood predator-prey relationships, symbiotic partnerships, parasitic infections. But the Kralix defied every category. They killed their hosts, but not immediately. They caused pain, but also induced euphoric states during certain phases of infection. They destroyed cellular structure, but the breakdown products were precisely arranged, as if being prepared for some purpose. What if they weren't just weapons? What if they were something else entirely? Harrison opened the container. The creatures pulsed brighter as they sensed the change in their environment. Under the laboratory's sterile light, their movements became more agitated, more purposeful. Harrison watched them organize themselves into geometric patterns that seemed to shift based on some internal logic he couldn't decipher. He thought about David Kim mouthing please with his last conscious breath. He thought about the 46 other mercy injections he had administered. He thought about the thousands more who would die if no solution was found. The Hegemony's observers, monitoring the colony through orbital satellites, recorded what happened next with clinical precision. They watched the human scientist examine the specimens under various wavelengths of light. They watched him take tissue samples, run cellular analyses, perform gene sequencing that revealed structures their own scientists had missed. They watched him pause in his work and look out the window at his dying world. They watched him return to his desk, remove a small sample of Kralix tissue from its containment field, and without hesitation, place it in his mouth. The reaction was immediate. Harrison's vital signs spiked. His body temperature rose. Biomonitors detected massive cellular activity throughout his nervous system. The Hegemony's xenobiologists, observing from their command ship, prepared to document another successful termination. Harrison began to convulse. For 17 minutes, the human scientist writhed on his laboratory floor as the Kralik symbiont attempted to integrate with his nervous system. Pain beyond description flooded every nerve ending. His cellular structure began to break down, then rebuild itself, then break down again as his immune system fought against the alien intrusion. But something else was happening, something the Hegemony's scientists had never observed in their previous deployments. Instead of simply dissolving Harrison's tissues, the Kralik's organisms were interfacing with them. Neural pathways that had been dormant since birth suddenly activated. Synaptic connections multiplied exponentially. His brain's electrical activity spiked to levels that should have caused immediate death. The convulsions intensified. Harrison's body temperature fluctuated wildly as his metabolism shifted to accommodate the symbiont's requirements. His heart rate varied from barely detectable to dangerously rapid. Every organ system in his body was being rewritten at the cellular level. Then, slowly, the chaos began to organize itself. The observers expected to watch him dissolve from within, as thousands had before him. Instead, Harrison's vitals stabilized. The convulsions stopped. The man stood up, brushed dust from his clothes, and returned to his microscope. Dr. Michael Reeves found Harrison 6 hours later, still working, still alive. The laboratory was filled with a strange, sweet smell, like flowers blooming in a graveyard. "James?" Reeves called from the doorway, afraid to enter. "James, what happened? Your vital monitor went crazy, then went dark. The medical AI flagged you as deceased 2 hours ago." Harrison looked up from his work, and Reeves saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The man's eyes had changed. Still human, still unmistakably James Harrison, but with flecks of the same bioluminescent green that characterized the Kralik specimens. More disturbing was the way Harrison moved. Fluid, precise, as if every gesture was calculated for maximum efficiency. "I'm fine, Michael," Harrison said, his voice carrying a strange harmonic undertone that seemed to resonate in Reeves's chest. "Better than fine, actually. I think I figured out what these little fellows are really for." Harrison gestured to the microscope. Reeves approached cautiously, noting that Harrison's skin temperature felt elevated and that a faint luminescent pattern was visible beneath the surface of his arms. Whatever had happened to his friend, it was far from over. What Reeves saw through the microscope defied every principle of xenobiology he knew. The Kralik specimens were no longer isolated organisms. They had formed complex networks, connected by thread-like neural pathways that pulsed with coordinated electrical activity. But more impossibly, these networks seemed to be interfacing with human cellular tissue, not consuming it, but integrating with it, enhancing it, rebuilding it into something both human and alien. "They're not parasites," Harrison said softly, his words carrying undertones that made Reeves's spine tingle. "They're symbiotes. The dissolution effect only occurs when the host's biology rejects the integration. But if you can convince your cellular structure to accept them..." Harrison rolled up his sleeve. Beneath his skin, intricate patterns of green light pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The luminescence followed the paths of major blood vessels and nerve clusters, creating a living map of his internal systems. "They enhance everything," he whispered, his eyes tracking micro-movements in the air that shouldn't have been visible to human perception. "Reaction time, processing speed, pattern recognition. I can feel the electrical fields of every living thing in this building. I can sense the orbital satellites monitoring us. I know exactly how many Hegemony ships are positioned around our system." Reeves backed away slowly, his medical training warring with his friendship. "James, what have you done?" "What I had to," Harrison replied, turning to face him with movements that seemed almost predatory in their precision. "Michael, the Krelix aren't weapons in the way we understand them. They're tools. Evolutionary catalysts. They don't want to kill us. They want to change us." Harrison moved to his computer terminal and began accessing files with typing speeds that blurred the line between human and machine capabilities. Data flowed across the screen faster than any normal person could read, but Harrison absorbed it all, processed it, understood it. "Look at the infection patterns," Harrison said, displaying colony-wide medical data. "The dissolution isn't random. It follows specific neural pathways targeting cognitive centers first. The organisms are trying to establish connection with human consciousness. When they fail, when the host's immune system prevents integration, they trigger cell death rather than become trapped in hostile tissue. The implications hit Reeves like a physical blow. "You're saying they're trying to help us?" "I'm saying they're trying to evolve us," Harrison corrected. "But human biology isn't compatible with their original design parameters. We're too rigid, too compartmentalized. They need willing cooperation from the host organism." Harrison's eyes unfocused for a moment, as if he were listening to something only he could hear. "Michael, get me a sample of every infected colonist's tissue. I need to map the failure patterns, understand why integration succeeds in some cases and fails in others. And send a message to command. Tell them, Doctor, Harrison requests immediate consultation with Captain Jones." The message that reached Captain Marcus Jones 12 hours later was unprecedented in the annals of human military history. A request for the commanding officer to submit to biological experimentation, specifically to deliberately infect himself with the same organism that was killing his soldiers. Jones was a career military man, 43 years old, with graying temples and scars from a dozen border conflicts. He had lost his entire family in the Kepler raids 15 years earlier, his wife and 2 sons murdered by pirates while he was deployed 3 systems away. The service was all he had left. It had given him purpose when everything else was taken away, structure when his world collapsed, and the opportunity to ensure other families didn't suffer as his had. He understood sacrifice in a way few humans did. He also understood that command meant making decisions other people couldn't, bearing responsibilities that would crush lesser souls, and sometimes choosing between bad options and worse ones. Jones's office in the colony's command bunker reflected his personality, sparse, functional, with only 2 personal items visible: a photograph of his family taken 3 months before their deaths, and a citation for valor from the Battle of Proxima Station, where he had held a critical choke point for 18 hours against overwhelming odds. Dr. Harrison met with Jones and his senior staff in the colony's main briefing room. The scientist had changed dramatically in the hours since his self-exposure. His movements were more fluid, almost graceful. His eyes tracked micro-movements that shouldn't have been visible to human perception. When he spoke, his words carried an authority that seemed to resonate on a subconscious level. Jones's senior staff represented the best of human military leadership. Colonel David Park, his second in command, was a tactical genius who had served with Jones for 15 years. Major Thomas Wright, the colony's intelligence officer, possessed an analytical mind that could find patterns in chaos. Each man had faced impossible odds before and survived through skill, determination, and mutual trust. The Hegemony made an error, Harrison explained to the assembled officers, his enhanced perception allowing him to read their micro-expressions, heart rates, stress indicators. They assumed the Krelix would affect us the same way they affected other species. They didn't account for human adaptability. Colonel Park leaned forward, his weathered face showing skepticism earned through decades of combat. "Dr. Harrison, with respect, thousands of our people are dying. How is this organism anything other than a weapon of mass destruction?" Harrison smiled, and for a moment, the bioluminescent patterns beneath his skin pulsed brighter. "Because they're not just killing us, Colonel. They're trying to evolve us. The death occurs when human biology rejects the symbiosis. But if we can overcome that rejection, he gestured to a holographic display showing comparative biological analyses. The data was staggering in its complexity. Genetic sequences, neural activity patterns, cellular regeneration rates, metabolic changes. Information that would have taken pre-integration humans weeks to process was being analyzed and presented in real time. The Kralix symbiont doesn't just enhance human physiology, Harrison continued. It networks human consciousness. Right now, I'm in contact with 47 colonists who have successfully undergone integration. We share sensory input, processing power, tactical awareness. Major Wright frowned, his intelligence training making him immediately suspicious of anything that sounded too good to be true. You're talking about a hive mind. No, Harrison said firmly, his enhanced perception allowing him to detect Wright's elevated stress levels, the micro-expressions that indicated fear of loss of individuality. Individual consciousness remains intact. Think of it more like a biological internet. Each person maintains their personality, their memories, their decision-making autonomy. But we can share information instantaneously, coordinate actions with perfect precision, pool our cognitive resources when needed. Harrison paused, his expression growing distant as he accessed the symbiont network. Imagine a squad where every soldier knows exactly what his teammates are seeing, hearing, thinking. Imagine a ship's crew that can coordinate with perfect precision, anticipating each other's actions before they're taken. Imagine a species that can function as both individual and collective as the situation demands. Captain Jones studied the data displays with the analytical mind that had kept him alive through 2 decades of warfare. The numbers were compelling, but numbers could lie. What mattered was practical application, real-world effectiveness, the ability to turn theory into victory. "What are the risks?" Jones asked, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility. "Death," Harrison said simply, appreciating Jones's direct approach. "If the integration fails, the symbiont dissolves you from the inside out. I estimate a 60% survival rate for healthy adult humans, higher with preparation and controlled conditions." The room fell silent. 60%. Just over half. Better odds than they had against the Hegemony's orbital bombardment, but still a coin flip with death. And if it succeeds, Harrison's expression grew distant, as if he were listening to voices only he could hear. The network was active. Other integrated humans throughout the colony sharing their experiences, their enhanced capabilities, their growing understanding of what they had become. "Then we become something the Hegemony has never encountered," Harrison said finally. "Something they're not prepared to fight." Jones looked around the room at his officers. Park, his oldest friend, who had served with him since their academy days and who trusted Jones's judgment even when he disagreed with it. Wright, brilliant and uncompromising, who had lost his brother in the first wave of attacks and whose analytical mind was already calculating probabilities and tactical applications. Dr. Reeves, pale but determined, who had already begun preparing integration protocols despite his obvious fear. These men had followed Jones through impossible situations before. They had trusted his decisions when reason said they were wrong, supported his plans when logic said they would fail. Now, he was asking them to trust him with something far more dangerous than their lives, their humanity itself. "How long do we have?" Jones asked. "The Hegemony fleet will move to orbital bombardment in 72 hours, Wright reported, accessing intelligence data from their long-range sensors. "They're not taking any chances after the first colonies went dark. Standard protocol is to sterilize from orbit once biological weapons have run their course." Jones nodded slowly. In 72 hours, New Eden would be glass and vapor. The Hegemony would claim the system's resources and move on to the next target. Unless they could find a way to fight back. Unless they could become something their enemies didn't expect. "Dr. Harrison," Jones said finally, his voice carrying the weight of command that had led men into battle for 2 decades. "Prepare the integration protocols. I want volunteers only. No one gets pressured into this." "Sir," Park objected, his concern for his friend overriding military protocol. "We're talking about gambling with the lives of our remaining personnel." "No, David," Jones replied, meeting his old friend's eyes. "We're talking about giving them a chance to fight back. The Hegemony thinks they've already won. They think we're just waiting to die. Let's show them what humans do when they're cornered." The volunteers came forward in numbers that surprised everyone except Harrison. Soldiers who had watched their friends dissolve, civilians who had lost families, scientists and engineers and medics and pilots. They came because they were afraid, and because they were angry, and because sitting still while an alien empire decided their fate was not in human nature. They came because Captain Jones had asked them to trust him one more time. The integration process was brutal. Even with Harrison's refined protocols, the mortality rate held at 40%. Harrison worked tirelessly to improve the procedure, analyzing each failure, refining the preparation protocols, searching for patterns that might increase survival rates. Those who died did so quickly, their bodies rejecting the symbiont so violently that cellular collapse occurred within minutes. Harrison insisted on being present for every integration attempt, using his enhanced perception to monitor the process, to understand what went wrong, to help those who could be saved. But those who survived. Lieutenant Aaron Cross emerged from his integration chamber with enhanced reflexes that let him navigate a room blindfolded. The young officer had volunteered after watching his entire squad die in the first wave of attacks. Now, he moved with inhuman grace, his perception expanded beyond normal human limits. He could sense electromagnetic fields, detect micro-vibrations in the air, process sensory input at speeds that made conventional reactions seem sluggish. Sergeant Maria Santos could feel the electromagnetic signatures of every electronic device within a kilometer. The veteran non-com had lost her family on Earth's lunar colony years earlier and had dedicated her life to protecting others. Now, her enhanced awareness extended beyond the visual spectrum, allowing her to monitor entire communication networks, detect stealth technologies, coordinate defensive systems through direct neural interface. Dr. Emily Foster found she could process biological data at speeds that made conventional computers seem sluggish. The colony's chief medical officer had worked alongside Reeves in the infected wards, watching helplessly as her patients died. Now she could analyze genetic sequences in real time, understand biological processes at the molecular level, develop treatments and countermeasures with unprecedented precision. Each successful integration added to the growing network, creating connections that enhanced every individual while maintaining their unique personalities and capabilities. The integrated humans didn't lose themselves. They became more than they had been before. But it was Captain Jones's integration that truly demonstrated what they had become. Jones volunteered for the process after 48 hours of observation. He had watched his people transform, seen their capabilities expand, felt the growing confidence that came from knowing they finally had a way to fight back. As their commander, he couldn't ask them to take risks he wasn't willing to take himself. The integration chamber was a converted medical bay, lined with monitoring equipment that tracked every aspect of the process. Harrison personally oversaw Jones's preparation, using everything he had learned from previous integrations to maximize the chances of success. "Sir," Park said, as Jones prepared to enter the chamber, You don't have to do this. We have enough integrated personnel to mount a defense." Jones smiled at his old friend. "David, you know me better than that. I've never asked anyone to go somewhere I wouldn't go myself." The process began with injection of specialized biopreparers designed to make human cellular structure more receptive to symbiont integration. Jones's vitals were monitored constantly as his body temperature rose and his neural activity spiked. The next phase involved exposure to controlled concentrations of Krelix organisms, allowing them to establish initial contact with his nervous system. For the first hour, everything proceeded normally. Jones's enhanced physiology, conditioned by decades of military training and combat stress, proved remarkably adaptable to the integration process. His vital signs remained stable as the symbiont colonies established themselves throughout his body. Then something extraordinary happened. The monitoring equipment detected neural activity patterns unlike anything Harrison had observed in previous integrations. Jones's brain was forming connections not just with the symbiont organisms, but with the entire network of integrated humans throughout the colony. The process was establishing him as a central node, a focal point through which the collective consciousness could organize itself. For 12 hours, Jones remained unconscious while his nervous system underwent complete reconstruction. His body temperature fluctuated wildly. His heart rate varied from barely detectable to dangerously rapid. At one point, his brainwave activity flatlined for 17 minutes, and Harrison feared they had lost him. But Jones's will to survive, forged through years of combat and loss, proved stronger than the biological chaos consuming his body. Slowly, gradually, the integration stabilized. The symbiont networks in his system reached unprecedented complexity, creating neural pathways that connected him not just to other integrated humans, but to the very electronic systems of the colony itself. When Jones finally opened his eyes, Harrison knew immediately that something fundamental had changed. The captain's awareness extended far beyond normal human limits. He could sense the electromagnetic signatures of every device in the medical center, monitor communication traffic throughout the colony, coordinate with integrated personnel across continents. The Hegemony's command ship received its first real shock when Jones stepped into the colony's communication center 3 days later. The captain had spent those days learning to control his enhanced capabilities, working with Harrison to understand the full extent of his transformation. When he opened a channel to the Hegemony fleet, his voice carried harmonics that registered on frequencies no human vocal cords should have been able to produce. The transmission reached every ship in the fleet simultaneously, bypassing their communication protocols, resonating through their hull structures in ways that their technology couldn't explain. "Hegemony Command," Jones said, his words somehow reaching every ship in the fleet simultaneously. "This is Captain Marcus Jones of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. I believe we need to talk." The response came from Supreme Admiral Korthak himself, a Hegemony veteran with 3 centuries of conquest experience. The ancient warrior had overseen the subjugation of dozens of species, had perfected the art of breaking civilizations through precise application of terror and overwhelming force. "Human, your position is hopeless," Korthak transmitted from his flagship, his voice carrying the arrogance of absolute certainty. "Surrender now, and we will grant your people quick deaths." Jones smiled, and though the Admiral couldn't see it, somehow every member of the Hegemony fleet felt a sudden chill. The integrated humans throughout the colony shared Jones's amusement, their collective consciousness touching the alien ships like fingers probing a wound. "Admiral," Jones replied, his enhanced perception allowing him to monitor Hegemony communication traffic, analyze their tactical positions, understand their strategic weaknesses. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid we're no longer the same species you decided to exterminate." What followed was a demonstration that redefined the Hegemony's understanding of human capabilities. The first sign that something had changed came when Hegemony probe ships attempted reconnaissance of the colony's defenses. The integrated humans didn't just detect the incoming vessels, they anticipated them. Jones's network had analyzed the fleet's deployment patterns, predicted their tactical doctrines, calculated probable approach vectors with mathematical precision. The probe ships found themselves facing defensive fire that anticipated their movements before they made them. Human weapons systems, enhanced by integration with the colony's networks, tracked targets with inhuman precision. Missiles changed course mid-flight to intercept evasive maneuvers that hadn't been executed yet. The Hegemony's tactical AIs, designed to process information faster than any biological intelligence, found themselves outmatched by humans whose consciousness operated at the speed of thought, who shared information instantaneously across vast distances, who could coordinate actions with perfect precision. When Hegemony dropships descended, they found themselves facing soldiers who seemed to know their every move before they made it. The integrated humans moved with perfect coordination, each warrior aware of exactly where his teammates were, what they were seeing, what they were planning. They fought not as individuals, but as a single organism with multiple bodies. Lieutenant Cross led his squad through the alien assault forces like water flowing around stones. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge energy weapons that should have been impossible to avoid. His tactical awareness, enhanced by the network, let him coordinate with support teams across the battlefield without communication delays. Sergeant Santos coordinated orbital defenses from a bunker 50 kilometers from the main battle, her consciousness directly interfaced with the colony's weapon systems. She could feel the electromagnetic signatures of every Hegemony ship, predict their firing patterns, coordinate defensive responses across multiple platforms simultaneously. Dr. Foster had abandoned her medical duties to join the integration teams, using her enhanced biological understanding to accelerate the transformation process. Every new integrated human added to their collective capabilities, expanding their network's processing power, increasing their tactical advantages. But it was the ground assault on the Hegemony's forward operating base that truly shattered their confidence. The base had been established on New Eden's northern continent, a fortified position designed to coordinate the final phases of the planetary sterilization. Hegemony engineers had spent weeks preparing defenses that could withstand any conceivable human assault. Energy barriers, automated weapon systems, overlapping fields of fire that created kill zones no biological force could penetrate. Captain Jones led the attack personally, along with 40 integrated soldiers. They moved through the alien fortifications like ghosts, their enhanced perception allowing them to detect energy fields, anticipate automated defenses, coordinate their movements with precision that bordered on prescience. The Hegemony's defenders found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously. Human soldiers appeared behind defensive lines that should have been impenetrable, struck at weak points that shouldn't have been discoverable, coordinated attacks with timing that defied explanation. In the command center, Jones faced Admiral Korthak in personal combat. The alien was larger, stronger, armed with energy weapons that could cut through steel. His exoskeleton had been forged in the heart of a star, his tactical experience accumulated over 3 centuries of conquest. But Jones moved with inhuman grace, anticipating every strike, every shot, every tactical decision. He fought not just with his own skills, but with the accumulated experience of every integrated human in the colony. The network fed him tactical data in real time, analyzed Korthak's fighting patterns, predicted his strategies before the alien commander could implement them. When it was over, when the Admiral lay defeated among the ruins of his command center, Jones knelt beside the dying alien. Korthak's breathing was labored, his energy reserves depleted. his proud warrior's spirit finally broken by an enemy he couldn't understand. "We didn't want this war," Jones said softly, his voice carrying genuine regret. "You brought these weapons to our worlds, thinking they would destroy us. You were wrong. You've given us the tools to become something greater than we were." Admiral Korthak's eyes, dimming with approaching death, fixed on Jones's face. "What? What are you?" "We're what you made us," Jones replied. "We're what happens when humans stop being prey." Admiral Korthak's last words, transmitted back to the Hegemony command before his vital signs ceased, were, "They're not human anymore." The withdrawal began within hours. The Hegemony fleet departed New Eden's system without attempting orbital bombardment, without demanding surrender, without any of the usual protocols of conquest. They simply left, taking their fear with them like a contagion that would spread through their empire. But Jones knew this was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, word of the integration spread throughout human space. Volunteers arrived from every colony, every world, every space station. The process was refined, the survival rate improved. Humanity began to change. Dr. Harrison, now serving as the primary researcher for what had become known as the Symbiosis Project, made discovery after discovery. The Kralix organisms weren't just enhancing human biology, they were unlocking potential that had always been present. Neural pathways that had remained dormant for millennia suddenly activated. Sensory capabilities that human evolution had never required suddenly became available. "We're not becoming something alien," Harrison explained to the colony leadership in one of their regular briefings. "We're becoming what humans were always meant to be." The integrated humans developed capabilities that defied conventional understanding. They could interface directly with electronic systems, communicate across vast distances without technology, coordinate actions with precision that made conventional military doctrine obsolete. Each new integration added to their collective knowledge, their shared experience, their growing understanding of what they had become. Colonel Park, who had undergone integration 3 weeks after Jones, discovered he could analyze tactical situations at speeds that made computer modeling seem antiquated. Major Wright's intelligence capabilities had expanded beyond conventional espionage. He could detect deception through electromagnetic signatures, analyze behavioral patterns at the subconscious level, coordinate information gathering across multiple networks simultaneously. But it was Captain Jones who made the most disturbing discovery. 3 months after the integration, while reviewing the biological data Harrison had collected, Jones noticed patterns that chilled him. His enhanced analytical capabilities, amplified by the network's collective processing power, allowed him to examine the Kralix genetic structure with unprecedented detail. The symbionts weren't random organisms. Their genetic structure was too perfect, too precisely engineered for integration with human biology. The molecular mechanisms that allowed them to interface with human nervous systems were too sophisticated, too specifically designed. Dr. Harrison, Jones called his chief scientist to his office one evening as New Eden's sun set over the rebuilt cities. "I need you to look at something." Harrison arrived with Dr. Reeves and Colonel Park, both now integrated and part of the expanding network of human consciousness. The 4 men represented the leadership of what had become humanity's first post-human colony, though they were still grappling with what that meant. Jones displayed the genetic analysis on his office's holographic projector, the data streams flowing faster than unenhanced humans could follow. "Look at the base protein sequences," Jones pointed to specific markers. "Now compare them to human DNA." Harrison studied the data for several minutes, his enhanced processing capabilities allowing him to analyze patterns at speeds that would have taken pre-integration humans days to complete. What he found defied explanation. "That's impossible," Harrison whispered, his enhanced perception detecting stress indicators in all four men as the implications became clear. "What is it?" Park asked, though his own analytical capabilities were already beginning to understand. "The Kralix symbiont," Harrison said slowly, his voice carrying harmonics of disbelief and growing horror. "It shares approximately 40% of its genetic structure with human DNA, not similar sequences, identical markers, as if it was designed specifically for us," Jones finished, the network's collective consciousness grappling with revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. The Hegemony hadn't developed the Kralix as a weapon against humanity. Someone else had. Someone who knew human biology intimately. Someone who had engineered an organism that would either kill humans or transform them into something far more dangerous. "The Hegemony was used," Reeves said, his voice barely above a whisper as the network processed the ramifications. "Someone gave them these weapons, knowing what would happen." Jones nodded grimly, his enhanced awareness allowing him to monitor communication traffic throughout human space, to coordinate with other integrated colonies, to understand the scope of what was unfolding. The question is, who and why? The answer came 3 days later in a transmission that reached every integrated human simultaneously, not through communication devices, but directly through the symbiont network itself. The signal bypassed every technological system, every security protocol, every defensive measure humanity had developed. A voice that sounded human but carried harmonics that suggested vast age and power spoke to them across impossible distances. "Greetings, children of Earth. We have been waiting for you to awaken for so very long. The Hegemony has served their purpose. Now it is time for you to claim your true inheritance. We are the progenitors, and we have much to discuss." The transmission contained more than 100,000 words. It carried data streams that uploaded directly into the integrated human's consciousness. Star charts, genetic sequences, historical records spanning millions of years. Information that painted a picture of galactic history that contradicted everything humanity thought they knew. The progenitors were ancient beyond comprehension, beings who had seeded the galaxy with life, guided evolution across countless worlds, shaped the development of consciousness itself. They had created the Kralix not as weapons, but as tools of transformation, designed to elevate promising species to their next evolutionary stage. Humanity was not the first species to undergo this transformation. The records showed dozens of others, all following similar patterns: initial contact, conflict, integration, ascension. Each species that successfully adapted to symbiont integration became something greater than they had been before. Post-biological entities capable of thought at light speed, coordination across galactic distances, manipulation of matter and energy at the quantum level. But the records also showed something else. Species that failed the integration test were eliminated, not by the progenitors directly, but by those who had successfully transcended. The Hegemony itself was revealed to be one such post-biological civilization, engineered to serve as gardeners, pruning away species that proved unworthy of advancement. The transmission ended, leaving the integrated humans with a terrible realization. The war with the Hegemony hadn't been about conquest or resources. It had been a test, a crucible designed to force human evolution, to determine whether humanity was worthy of joining the galactic community of post-biological consciousness. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, their true creators were waiting to see if humanity would accept their destiny or choose to remain trapped in biological limitations. Captain Jones looked out at the stars through his office window, feeling the presence of 40,000 integrated humans across a dozen worlds, all sharing his growing sense of unease. The network hummed with activity as thousands of enhanced minds processed the implications, analyzed the data, prepared for whatever came next. The war was over, but something far more dangerous was just beginning. In the depths of space, ancient ships began to move. Ships that had been waiting for millennia for humanity to finally become what they had always been intended to be. Ships carrying beings who had transcended biology so long ago that they barely remembered what it meant to be human. The progenitors were coming home, and they expected their newest children to be ready for the next phase of galactic evolution. Jones felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a familiar burden. He had led humanity through one impossible war. Now he would have to lead them through something far more challenging. The choice between remaining human and becoming something else entirely. The future of the species hung in the balance, and Captain Marcus Jones, no longer entirely human himself, was the man who would have to decide what humanity was willing to sacrifice to survive. Outside his window, the stars waited, and among them, ancient powers stirred, preparing to reclaim the children they had abandoned so long ago.